Hello and welcome to the Green Profit Academy Pros podcast. This show digs into the challenges in growing a lawn care and landscape business while maximizing your profit. I'm Christeen.
And I'm Steve Bousquet. We are the green industry experts in profit, growth, and leadership.
Good afternoon, Christeen. How are you today?
I'm good. Powering through the week, and it is a Wednesday today. So we're halfway through this week already.
Halfway through. You can't say hump day anymore. I don't think it's a woke thing. It's not appropriate. So we're not going to say hump day, and we're not even going to talk about the weather today. There you go. For all you listeners who are tired of us talking about the weather, we're going to get right into today's episode. And it's a super exciting episode, and it comes right out of really the information in Christeen Era's book, Profit First for Lawn Care and Landscape Businesses. And today's episode, we're going to unpack the revenue tiers in lawn and landscape businesses. In the Profit First book for lawn care and landscape businesses, Christeen outlines the targeted allocation percentages for financially healthy businesses.
Yeah, so this was, kind of an adoption from Mike's original book, Profit First. So those who may have read it, he unpacks the revenue tiers. And one of the things, so we sorted it into 7 revenue tiers. And I know, Steve, this was a discussion you and I dove into pretty deep and started reaching out, to other companies and, really verifying this information because they range from that, 0 to 250,000, right? All the way up to the 50 million. And there's certain tiers of revenue that we had identified companies in this industry struggle with. And there are certain things that happen in there. So we expanded this concept and included some extra details that is really industry specific. So, but from the feedback that I've gotten from people who have read the book, it has been very insightful, the information that we shared. And, today I want to just kind of take that opportunity to talk about, what are the revenue tiers? What are these percentages? How do they serve the industry? And what challenges happen at these different revenue tiers?
Oh, and there's different challenges at every revenue tier. And, a lot of us, when we started doing the revenue tiers originally, some of the tiers were pretty wide. And then, going back and looking at kind of notes and ideas of like the 40 businesses I had visited and their stages of growth. And then, visiting them 15 years ago and seeing their challenges 15 years ago at 1.5 million and now at 3 to 5 million, what were the new challenges? So we broke the tiers down a little bit. I think that definitely helps. Over the $5 million, only 5% of businesses, of any business, ever makes it over $5 million in revenue. And those are the businesses that succeed and thrive and survive. So that's not even counting the businesses that actually go out of business. So the businesses that are in business, only 5% will ever make it over 5 million. So it was really crucial to really focus on that, 1 million to 2.5 million, and then that 2.5 to 5 million, because at different ranges, the allocations are critically important to have dialed in.
Yeah, because that's a vital growth area of revenue. So as you're moving from that 1 million to that 2.5, your business is going through a change and a lot of growth. And then from that 2.5 to 5 million, it's another growth stage that your business is going through. And a lot of business gets stuck in those revenue tiers. So I am definitely excited to talk about like what that looks like, what it needs, for the business to move past that point. And just for those of you who are familiar with the book, the chapter 8 of the book, The Scalable Growth Business Model, that's the chapter that was created to help you move your business past some of these challenges and really get your percentages dialed in the business. So, and I know we did an episode on that prior. Maybe we'll go back to it and talk about it some more. But interestingly enough, I kind of wanted to share quickly is the revenue ranges for lawn care and landscape businesses in the US that's recorded. And this comes specifically from the IRS industry classification tax code, which means when you file your taxes, you have a code that is associated with your business type. So what they're doing is they're tracking the different business types and they're recording the different size of business based off of their revenue. So you might see a little code on your tax returns and you might have thought like, well, what is that? That's exactly what it is. And it makes it easy for them to collect this information and give us some wonderful, statistics. Just can't even say it, statistics to share with you. So it was interesting in writing the book that there was about 44% of this industry of these businesses are under $200,000. So an extremely large portion of this industry are just what we like to call our baby rock star companies, right? So they're under 200,000. It's probably just like a one, owner running it, and they might have some help or something. And that's typically what you find is around 200,000. And then it ranges up to where 17% are from that 200,000 to 500,000, which we have several clients that we work with who are there and they're trying to figure out now, well, how do I double it, right? And they're right on that cusp of that 500,000 and that 17% moving into that 500 to 1 million mark. And there's only 13% of lawn and landscape companies that are at that, $500,000 to $1 million mark. And, we also work with clients in there to where they're thinking, how can I double my income this year and get into that next level? And then from there, we go from 1 million to just under 5 million, and that's about 20%. And then as Steve shared, like that, over 5 million, it's that 5 to 7% that's in there that are surviving and still doing business out there in the world today.
Yeah. And, when you think about, so 44% of the lawn and landscape industry is $200,000 and less, right? That's typically going to be a one person show or one person with a helper. Now, I have gotten people who have asked me to help them where they have 4 people and they're doing 200,000 with the owner and 4 employees, and they were curious as to why they're broke and in debt and can't make money because the allocation percentages are off. There's just no way to do that. It's impossible. So if you're in that range and wonder why you're not making money, it's not your fault. It's literally impossible to have more than 2 employees. And that means you're not even doing $100,000 per employee. And that's, means that you're doing less than $50 an hour in revenue, which is really tough to turn any kind of reasonable profit. So in that 5 to 7% over 5 million, goes right in line with the statistics for all small businesses. It might be a little higher in lawn care and landscaping, over 5 million, and lower in industries like barbershops. And, I don't know how many barbershops would be over $5 million, right? So overall, it's an average. It's pretty interesting to see that the highest percentage once we get over 200 grand is in that $1 to $5 million range, which is the majority of our clients. And if they're not in that range yet, that's where we're helping them to get to.
Right. Yeah. And they have, the good foundation laid, to get there and continuing to build it. So in tier 1, this is companies bringing in $250,000 or less in revenue. And like, we had said earlier, the owner is typically the key employee and usually the only employee, maybe with some contractors and one full-time person. And in the book, we share like many freelancers are at this stage, right? Where it's like, they're not maybe officially a business, but they're like, it's kind of coming together. They're maybe not sure on pulling the trigger. Some of them have already established their company and, they're building things. And Steve, you already shared kind of what some of the challenges are, right? Too big of a crew. Maybe they're doing too many things at once. So they're being the everything guy, like Mike talks about his landscaper Ernie in, the book. And he shares how, he was cleaning gutters, mowing the lawn, painting the house, fixing the roof, the chimney, like all these things. So, that could be a challenge that's going on in their company. What are some other things that you yourself have experienced or that you're aware of for businesses around this 250,000 and below range?
So it depends really. Like sometimes you'll have people who are firemen or policemen or EMTs or teachers that start a landscape business, and they'll keep that under the $250,000 range. Sometimes they'll go full time, and it'll be a little bit of a struggle because it's transferring from that employee mindset to the owner mindset where you're responsible for everything. And that includes pricing, production, marketing, material, everything. Some of the challenges are, working in the field too much, actually, and not having any support staff, not hiring a real bookkeeper. And that is the struggle, not understanding the value of having good, clean, solid books so you can make real business decisions. Because they've been an employee or they're just starting, they don't understand, hey, I need financial information so I can make good financial decisions. So they cheap out on bookkeeping. I've seen them on Facebook, they brag about how cheap they got their taxes done for, as opposed to spending the money and getting a real bookkeeper, making sure that they're paying their bills on time, that they are getting all their invoicing out on time, that they can look at their books and know what their gross profit margins are. So they're so busy mowing the lawns, installing the pavers, pruning, doing the cleanups, so they're not focusing on that. And then the other thing, mistakes are not understanding how to manage their cash flow. So they're cash rich, cash poor. They have a lot of money at certain times of the year, and then other times they're broke, and they're actually using the job that they work at to pay for their landscaping habit or hobby, or they just are not making enough money. And typically they can stay at this level, especially if they have a spouse that's making enough money. They don't keep regular hours. They're not understanding a sales process, like answering the phone, showing up on appointments on time, getting back to people with set times for their appointments. So they're not understanding basically the 5 functions of business. They're focused on 1 or 2. Usually it's the deliverable part. They're still trying to get work by being cheap or being low person, because somebody did it for $50, they'll do it for $45. They don't have any overhead in their mind. They're not even quite sure what overhead exactly means. So they'll be too cheap.
Yeah, and I also feel like this is the revenue tier that the bad habits around and mindset around pricing happen, right? It's like, because it's just them, and then they sacrifice themselves. They feel it's too cheap. They're new, working in the industry or throwing themselves out there. So they're going, oh, well, yeah, I can do it for half, or the customer makes the price point, right? And then if you really ran the numbers, you'd be almost doing the job for free. So I feel like at this stage is when the bad habits around pricing and really knowing your numbers actually start. And then as the company grows, that mindset and those habits grow with the company. And then it's always, poor with cash, and there's not enough profit, and there's this challenge and that challenge. And they could be bouncing between tier 1 and tier 2 because of these habits that they've developed as, right out the gate as they were growing that revenue up to that $250,000.
Yes. And they are not totally ready to hire someone. I did it. Hey, you're hired, get in the truck, we're going to work. That was the onboarding, right? So there was no intentional strategic onboarding or recruiting. It was like, hey, we need help. You'd run an ad back in the day, people would respond. You'd hire the first 2 people that might have showed interest, and then one shows up for the day of the job, and then you work with that. But, just not having real intentional or real any like systems. And when I say 5 functions of business, I'm talking marketing, sales, deliverables, finance, and people. So it's a job. It could be a great job. You can make a decent living actually In this under 250,000, if you keep it one person and a helper and the owner, you could probably make 55 to 120 grand a year if you really worked hard, and you could run that really well, especially if you bucked up and got a bookkeeper that kept all the records straight, and you would see where you're making money. I've met 3 or 4 people just in our local area that make about 100 grand a year with this model.
Yeah. And I know even in our area, it's really hard to find an irrigation person, especially when it's time, to blow out the lines, right? So, and where they show up. Like, that's my husband's number one complaint. He's like, oh, the guy we hired last year isn't responding. He's not showing up this year. So that happened for a few years until about 2 years ago. And interestingly enough, the guy that comes and does our service, all the money he makes, it's just a side job for him. And he started it because he himself was having problems getting somebody to his house, right? And so it was an opportunity. He uses that money to bring his family on a nice family vacation every year. And that's all he does with it. So, it's just like this little side gig. So I think it's smart. He knows what he wants to do with it. He knows, he likes his day job, and he shows up for the customers that he does get, so he doesn't have to waste a time going and finding new customers. So he's got a little gig going.
Definitely fills a niche for a lot of people, and in a lot of communities too. And then, so the next tier, that $250,000 to $500,000, where they start hiring an employee or 2 employees, they start developing basic systems such as customer relationship management tools that they need. They start to pay their people. Their operating expenses increase, and this is kind of where the shock comes in, like. Understanding, how much it costs to have an employee. You're thinking you're paying $20, but then there's the other 20% for the labor burden, right? Unemployment, workers' comp, you have to FICA match, etc. So it starts to add up. And also the cost of equipment. I think it really surprises people how much. And buying used equipment is a great place if you're a mechanic. If you're not a mechanic, new is better. Also, other people start to do more work. The owner's comp is adjusted down usually. So sometimes they think they're going to make more money when they hire people, and they can actually take a step backwards with their income.
Yeah, and it really depends on how the company's structured. And here again, right, is your pricing correct? Are your margins and markups correct? So if you have that dialed in, you may not be working as much in the field and doing more with management, and or sales. So, looking at what are you making, how are you going to scale up your business and make sure you have enough for all of the things coming, but then also to pay yourself. So you're not taking that pay cut. So you might be doing, let's say, 30% of field work to 50% of field work. And the rest of it, you're starting to train people, you're starting to manage, you're establishing systems and processes in your business. So you're working on your business a little bit more versus in your business. And this can include, going to conferences, right, to learn and grow from other people in the industry, doing coaching and classes. So again, you're learning and growing and increasing your business acumen, and you're figuring out really how to step into, this new role of I'm not just a team of me, but I have to now be a leader, even if it's to like 1 or 2 people. And it's important to invest back in the business, make sure there's enough profit there for you to do so, and also invest in yourself as a leader, because really being a leader is going to make or break your business when it comes to employees being able to show up, hiring the right people, you being someone that they can follow and listen to, and that they can respect and also appreciate on both sides.
It's an exciting time, 250 to 500,000, because you have all these possibilities and you haven't run into the big challenges yet, right? So there's typically in this kind of model at this period, there's things that you can handle. Like, one of the challenges I see, they're new to estimating and bidding, right? So they underbid, they don't understand all the time, or they overbid because they don't know how long things take. They don't have data to base their estimating on. So they're doing their best. So that's a big challenge. And the other thing is like now they have to do marketing. So now they're going outside of that kind of friends and family and community, and they're starting to deal with people that they don't really know, they've never met. They start to get the, you give me a good deal and I'll get you more work than you can ever handle bull crap. And the person just, you give them a discount. Oh, this guy's going to give me so much work. And all they do is complain and complain. And then you never get another customer and you're like, good riddance. So you get those once you get into this range. And then you also start getting people asking you to do things that aren't in your wheelhouse or your specialty. And it can, become a problem because they see, oh, you can do this. That's going to be the challenge actually in every stage because they're so talented. And one thing we think we can do other things and customers will ask us that. And then the other big challenge is the cash flow, payroll, making sure that you have enough payroll and understanding how to manage that, because this is where people kind of bump into this $500,000 and the payroll, they're like, it's always a challenge to meet payroll. And they give up and they go back down. They'll stay in that $250,000 to $300,000 range with just one helper and themselves and maybe some summer help because they can't handle the payroll because the pricing and cash flow is not organized.
Right. It's payroll's the new baby that's keeping them up at night. Right. Yeah. So and that's one of the reasons why I really love Profit First and the advanced versions is because once you get it implemented, you can have that payroll account, and that payroll account is there to allocate a percentage of your revenue towards your payroll. So it is always there, right? And it's not going to keep you up at night. Like that's one of the biggest things I hear with a company that implements Profit First. They say, one, we always make payroll now. I'm sleeping and I'm never surprised by taxes because the money's there. No matter how much they say we owe, we always have enough in the tax account to pay it. So those are the two challenges as you scale up into this revenue level, right? Because you have less expenses in some ways. If you're building it right, you're making more profit, you might owe more taxes. But then as you hire people, you have those payroll challenges, which is a whole new ball game. You're like, oh, should I run payroll every week? Should it be every other week? Like, what's the standard here? And you don't ever want to ask somebody to hold a payroll check, right? Like that's no way to do business. And it doesn't instill in your employees that you're a reliable company to work for.
Yeah, and another challenge, and I've seen this, is that when, like I said, they start taking jobs, maybe paper jobs that they shouldn't, like bigger landscape jobs, like they go from maintenance into landscaping, and they don't have the expertise. So they start getting questioned by their clients. So their new clients that they've never met, they take on this work and they start getting questioned on their expertise and their methods. That's one of the things. Then it's hard to collect money. And they have, difficult clients. So this is where you really want to stay in your lane at that revenue level, at all revenue levels. But this is where it can be the most painful when you're transitioning up to that. And the next level is the 500,000 to $1 million, which again, right, it's a growth trend. Patterns continue with more systems, more people. Focus on increasing profits is essential, this income range, because for so many businesses, the growth, from 1 million to 5 million is the hardest to manage. But at this 500,000 to $1 million, again, it's exciting, it's new, and you are buying trucks, mowers, bobcats, skid steers faster than you can pay it off. And this is the range where you can end up with too much, I call it too much month at the end of the money.
Yeah. And what you really want to do, like this revenue range has a lot of opportunity. Because you're between that $500,000 to $1 million. If you're pricing things properly and you're managing your projects, and really listening to your numbers, then you can ensure that you're going to have the cash flow that you need to level up. So you're not building debt. You're starting to create that strong savings account for the next two revenue tiers. So it's kind of like that gearing up period to where you can start putting money away. And we have, at the Advanced Profit First, we call it a growth fund. And we had a client do this that was moving past the 1 million mark. They were at about $800,000. And, they were looking at, well, how can I save up money in order to reinvest in the company and still keep the company running? So we identified a percentage that we started putting away. And then as they made more revenue, and this was outside of their profit account, as they continued to increase in revenue size, that account got fatter and fatter, and we were able to increase that growth fund percentage. So it allowed them to really come out the gate strong from this 1 million revenue tier into that 5 million, that 1 to 5 million, because they were really gearing up for that next level.
Yeah, and this is the stage that I think, what I did was I raced through, went from 275 to a million, and then back down to like 680 or around $700,000. I think I would have, this is the revenue you want to stay in for a couple of years and get your systems dialed in. Because if you race through this, once you get to that million to 2.5 million, if you don't have your systems there, it's way riskier at that level to start trying to build the plane as you're flying it, so to speak, than at this level. You definitely want to make sure the debt is under control, that you have your systems for all your 5 functions of business in place, and you're also building your team of your bookkeepers, your CPAs, your attorneys, because you're going to need attorneys at some point for contract law, for labor law, and make sure that you're kind of building your team in there. One of the biggest challenges I see people go from that 500 to a million is selling lots of more cheap work. And, I've had people, these HOAs or these condos or this, they love me. And I got all this work, and it's like, then they realize that, well, they're 20 to 25% cheaper than everybody else. And that's how they got the work. And if you're running a 10 to 15% net, being 25% cheaper means that not only are you not getting a net, you're actually paying the other 10% out of your own pocket. So that's where that growth to 100 to a million goes, and then they dial it back down before they make the adjustments and move up. So this is an exciting growth period, but you don't want to rush your way or push yourself too fast with this. Make sure that you have your systems in place before you bust through that $1 million.
Yeah. And it's also ideal to have the right people on your team. I find that businesses that do grow quickly through these stages, they have that really strong office manager in place that, is helping with the systems and processes, that's helping manage the team, that's helping do the bookkeeping and communicating with the external accountant and CPA. They're helping with the hiring process. So really having a strong key player on your team, whether that be the office manager or even another manager, so kind of one of those emerging leaders in your company, is really important.
Yeah, and that $1 million is where you're going to have your full time. So a lot of times people will use their friends, family, wife, spouse as their bookkeeper, which I do not advise. I advise actually getting a trained bookkeeper. But up to the $1 million is at the point where now you have to have full time. Somebody answering the phone, somebody helping the office. And then once you're ready and, you're not in debt and you have systems, then you can move that $1 to $2.5 million mark, which can be a really nice sweet spot for a lot of years. This is where the owner is still working in the field, but also working in the business and doing sales. So it's a lot of work to be in this zone, and you can probably do it for a period of time as long as you're, again, niching and you're not trying to do too many services. The $1 million to $2.5 million, the owner is working more in the business, and therefore the company can generate more profit. The pricing is right. The estimating starts to get really dialed in. The owner can be the salesperson and the operations manager, and often there are 2 people in the office doing admin functions. So an office manager, phone, filing, helping with all kinds of stuff that goes on in the office. These positions are usually the office manager and admin support. The office manager or admin support needs to have skills required to manage the books and should have an external accountant an absolute external accountant to work with their staff.
Core Growth Strategies provides business growth management solutions through cloud accounting, bookkeeping, and strategic business consulting programs. Our team works with small businesses in lawn care and landscape and trade industries throughout the U.S. We increase our clients' business acumen by creating business performance transparency through financials and strategic advisement based on industry best practices and benchmarks. Our experienced team provides support, guidance, and coaching, thereby allowing our clients to connect with viable data and discover their own solutions. Core Growth Strategies programs and services are designed to get your business from where it is now to where you have always dreamed it to be. Visit us today at coregrowthstrategies.com and follow us on Facebook, Instagram, or LinkedIn. Don't miss our exclusive limited time podcast special. Just mention promo code GPA Pro to any member of our team during your complimentary consultation, or enter the promo code on our site when you sign up for one of our online programs. That's promo code GPA Pro. And the reason why, we're looking at, because it's like 1 to 2 and you're growing, is at that, it's like we said earlier, it's 1 million per admin person, right? So looking at that. And so you don't want somebody on your team, let's say you're at 2 million and you have 2 people on your team. One of those people need to have those skills when it comes to bookkeeping, even if it's just basic bookkeeping skills, right? And then you have an external accountant who's buttoning up the books, making sure things are coded properly, and working with your internal person. So it's really making sure you're not admin heavy in the wrong places, because if you have those 2 people and you're at like that 2 million and you don't have anybody handling the financial side of the business internally, who's doing that job? And if they're not skilled in it, then they're not doing the job right to begin with. But then you're going to have to pay someone to come in and do the books, and that's an additional cost. So it is wise to have a higher end accountant doing reviews at this point and really leveraging your internal office team to help manage those books. And I know that there are many skilled office managers out there that know enough to do a good enough job if they're working with an external accountant. We have several clients that have internal bookkeepers that are doing this, this very same thing at so many different revenue tiers from pretty much year on up. And in working with a professional accountant, at least with my company, they're learning. So our team is teaching their internal person, and they're getting better and better. And that's one of the things that in working with our clients, we want to make sure happens. But having that balance of admin staff, and then knowing too, like if you're the owner stepping into the business at this level, like you're going to be holding either all of the sales or all of the operations or half and half, you're going to be still holding some roles there.
Yeah, and it's a good place to be as long as you have the support and you're really narrowing your line. You can stay in this indefinitely. I know many people, they just do either lawn applications or lawn applications and lawn maintenance, or they do hardscaping, or they really stay in their niche and they're the expert, or they're the guy or the company in their area for this. So they can do really well in it. And as long as they stay in their niche, they're really solid, because they don't have to have all this investment in items or products and services that are limited during the time of the year. So this can be very profitable and extremely lucrative if you really nurture it. And provide a really good lifestyle because you're able to hire a little sales help and some management help and office help. So you're not tied to the business, as much as under a million. So what are the challenges in this? You can get swallowed up in this with ego and growth, because now you have 10 trucks and you kind of have a lot of money coming in, more than you've probably ever seen in your life. And if you don't know how to manage the cash, it goes away quickly. And I've seen, so taking too much at owner salary, not investing enough back in the business, buying too much equipment, especially buying equipment to save on taxes when you don't need to buy equipment. Not like having trained managers, so you're abdicating the management, not having trained office staff, so you're just abdicating it. Typically, family members, because they need a job, become your office staff, and they're not either qualified or don't have the skill set, or both. That's kind of some dangers. And also the owner taking their eye off the ball and start adding other services like, oh, we're good at this and that, so we need to do Christmas lights, and we'll do ponds, and we'll do, parking lot sweeping and flower change outs and driveway sealing and power washing. And, it just turf applications and hydro seeding. And it just goes on. And it's like bark blower, every one of those services takes investment, capital, training, resources, marketing, sales. So we look at it, this is a really cool piece of equipment. We don't really understand at that level everything that's involved in it. And this is kind of a tipping point for a lot of businesses. Either they go back down to $1 million, or they'll, stay in this and really nurture it and make really good money, or they'll move forward up to the next level. So it's really a tipping point. But like I said, if you know how to nurture this, you can do really well at this level.
Yeah. And that was, Steve, I was thinking the same exact thing, is like, what happens at this level? And, my thoughts went back to like the ego kicks in, right? I have all this money. I'm going to be a baller and buy this nice car and buy this nice house and use my business as an ATM machine. And I think as well, there can be a disconnect of the awareness, right? And the awareness around, am I making money because I'm doing the right things? Or am I making money because there's such a high demand in my market for what I do? And in any situation, you never want to just kind of take advantage of that. There's such a huge demand in my market that we are making money hand over fist, and we're growing and we're doing this. Being aware of that's the driver behind it, that there's a high demand in your market, and not taking it as like this ego thing where you're going, oh yeah, I'm doing all the right things, I'm so good at this level, because when that stops or takes a shift, you're not going to know how to measure and manage it. So really, putting that where it belongs, like what is responsible for our growth? What is responsible, for the amount of revenue that's happening in the business right now? What's contributing to that, and being very aware of it, being aware of your numbers, and not getting caught up into I'm about ready to join the big boys club, moving closer to that 2.5 to 5 million revenue tier.
Yeah. And the percentage of people that get through this, get into that. And we did split this apart in the book, but the majority of the lawn and landscape businesses that are in the 1 to 5 million will be in the 1 to 2.5 million. And that is reasonable. It's a reasonable amount. And sometimes they'll stay in that, not because it's kind of almost opposite of being in a market with a lot of demand. They'll have a very well-run business in a small market. So they're doing financially really well, and they're running their business really well. It's just a small market. Either they're landlocked, or, they're just so far away from a metro area. They're not a suburb. Maybe they're a vacation area. And those are typically some of the most business savvy people in lawn and landscape I know. Small market with this nice, $2 million revenue, $2.5 million revenue, typically doing really well. Again, but the ego of look at how much money I have, they start buying stuff they don't need. They're driving around in, Lincoln Navigators. Their wife has a Lincoln Navigator that the business is paying for, and they're doing $2 million. And that's a $100,000 SUV. And then they have their guys, using old equipment, or not wearing uniforms or a whole bunch of other things. So I've seen a little bit of it all, but typically they come around and realize they're, what they need to focus on. And sometimes we do stuff like that because we've gone without for so long and we've made promises to people in our life, our spouse, like I was going to take care of you, and I really haven't, but now that I have some money, I'm really going to overdo it. And get this, $100,000 SUV. But we've seen all kinds. So the other thing I think, if we're not already doing profit first between that 1.5 and 2 million, is not having a savings account for the company, that emergency fund, because it's not if things are going to get tough, it's when. And people say, well, I have my line of credit. The problem or challenge when you have a line of credit and use it for an emergency, once you use your line of credit, then what? So having that backup fund plus a line of credit, you're going to have, for me, it was 9/11, COVID, the housing or the financial crisis of 2007. I mean, I could go, it's going to happen. My business has been through 4 recessions. It's not if, it's when. So having that savings account. And also at that point, depending on your age and everything, if you haven't looked into starting a retirement fund, now's the time to really ramp up your retirement savings, because you want to get to the point where you don't have to sell your business to retire. You want to have a retirement so you can run your business, and you don't need that for that. All right, the 2.5 to 5 million.
Yeah, and that's our next tier. And this is where you can't be the owner operator any longer. So you're going to have to hire a salesperson, an operations manager, or maybe a combination of both. Maybe you're both wearing those hats in your business. And you also will need to add another administrative person, in the office to help with the day-to-day functions, support any of the production team, things like that. And this is where in this tier we share, a good rule of thumb is to have one admin team member per 1 million in revenue. And it should consist of an office manager, a bookkeeper. I know, Steve, when you hit a certain revenue level, you added an internal bookkeeper for your company. Your office manager kind of used to handle a little bit of it before. She was able to turn that over to the bookkeeper you hired and take on more of a leadership role in the business. You also have a customer support person who answers phones. You actually have and you're in a different revenue level, but looking at, your customer support people, you have an incoming person and an outgoing call person. So you have 2 different people that handle, communication tasks, and they also wear other hats in your company.
Yeah, and so we brought the internal bookkeeper on full time, about $4 million. And that was about the tier that it just needed that much attention. The office manager could no longer do all of that. And then the phone people, I did sales up until about 3.5 million. But after over 3 million, it was hard because there was a lot of other things I need to pay attention to. But the phone happened just because we have 3,500 customers. So the phone volume, my office manager could get nothing done at all if she had to answer the phone as the first. And then we had to do all these call aheads, return phone calls, communication for clients. And my outbound person couldn't get any of her phone calls done if she was taking phone calls in. So, typically we're receiving between 40 to 70 phone calls a day inbound. On certain days it's higher, and we track them. And it's very interesting to see in the spring, Mondays and Fridays are busy. And then the rest of the year, it's usually Wednesdays, the busier day. But it's difficult to get work done, especially for my office manager running financial plans, reports, any kind of like bigger picture intake and recruiting, training, development, if she's answering the phone all day. So that is kind of what we look at. So 5 million is about 5 people in the office. And as far as support. We do have, one full-time salesperson and our landscape manager who runs the landscaping. Plus he runs the operations. He does the sales, and he also will run a crew on a bigger job. But that's how we run it. It's just too many. Our salesperson runs about 1,000 leads a year for lawn care, and between 800 to 1,000, depending on the year. So that's just one person's job. So there's a lot to that, and we probably are a little heavy on our admin, but because of our growth, we'll grow into that in the next 2 years. And that was the first time we've ever been ahead of admin. We were always behind admin. So, we were doing 3.2 million when we hired our third admin. So we were, one person behind on the admin side when we finally got that person. And it created a lot of stress because some of my team were working 70, 80 hours a week in the spring. And that just is not a good lifestyle. So being aware of bringing those people in. And is it nice to have those extra people? It is. It's expensive, though. My break even is higher than it's ever been. Fortunately, I know my numbers. I know what we need to do to produce it. But, we don't hire just for the sake of hiring. We know all those percentages and ratios.
Yeah. And I also know that you guys are really dialed into making sure that people are working from their strengths, and you have some people on your team that's doing more than just admin work. Like you do a lot of your marketing and your social media in-house. So they're also wearing that hat and managing those roles, which you would usually pay for an external marketing company to do, and have a marketing fund account that would support that.
Yeah, we do a lot of stuff in-house because I'm a Clifton Strength certified coach. We align a lot of our team's strengths up. We do a lot of, personal development in-house, and it's not all done by me. It's done by other people depending on their strengths. We do marketing in-house. We do data management in-house, and it's based on the people first who, and we don't give them a job description and then say, try to fit that square peg into the round hole. We're like, okay, where are your strengths and talents, and how can they be utilized at work?
Yeah. So from the 1 million to 5 million tiers, you're at the point where your systems are no longer added just because they're simply nice to have, right? Where you're like, oh yeah, well, let's have a sales process, and let's have, a marketing process, or let's have, a customer service process. At this level of revenue, systems and processes are absolutely mandatory, because you nor your team can keep all these things in your head anymore, nor do you want them to, right? Because if you're going to scale and grow the company, you're going to have to, not only you as the owner, document some things or turn it over to someone that you trained, have them document those things. So your team members need to be responsible for documenting their processes and their procedures. And, and you might need a support person too to help them. Like you might have somebody on your team that's really strong at documenting processes. If let's say your office manager, they're great at so many things, but they're horrible at documenting their processes. You might have to have a gopher, someone who's going to go get those and document them, because if something were to happen to your office manager, then what? Where would you be? So making sure your systems are documented, you've got, checklists in place to support your team. It's not all, management by osmosis, to where you're basically saying hey, read my mind. These are my expectations. Oh, I didn't communicate those to you. Okay, well, you should probably know that that's what I want anyway. And that's no way to tier up from one revenue tier, to the next. So you're going to be working a lot on your business, versus in your business than you ever have before as you move through these two tiers.
Yeah, and really that's my whole job, is working on my business. And actually me not working on the business is making sure my team is working on the business. We have over 1,000 SOPs documented in our, I don't touch it. What is it?
System Hub. System Hub.
I'm the worst system collector of all. So my team loves System Hub, and they're using a new one where they're capturing videos on how to do things. So they have over 1,000, and we have someone that documents a lot of that stuff. So, and once you hit the 5 million plus, it's really having a team so someone can leave and everything goes. Like, I don't mean leave to quit, but if they're out for 2 weeks, everything still gets done. There might be 2 or 3 people that know how to do that person's job. Like, payroll, right? We have 3 people that can do the payroll hours. There's 3 people that can do social media if it needs to be done. There's 3 people that can do routing and scheduling, and on, because just there's always going to be one person out for some reason once your company gets to a certain size. So you have to have this redundancy, and the System Hub allows us to grab those SOPs and figure that out. And, when we have I had a HR person come in and, they wanted to go through our business and see what we did. It's a friend of mine, and she's a professional HR person. And I asked her for her feedback, and I was like, I was expecting all this, like, well, you're doing this wrong. You got to really straighten that out, And she's like, no, you guys, you got all your, I's are dotted and your T's are crossed, and you're covering everything. And that is, there's this, we have the systems. This is how we do it. This is how you do it. So same thing with estimating. It's interesting. I see mostly around that $2.5 to $3 million, or like $1.5 million to 3. The estimating is still difficult. Like, every job is a new job, and they have to figure this out. And only this guy knows that. Most people could come into our business, and within 2 or 3 days, they should be able to do estimating, all the estimating. Whether it's lawn care or even landscape construction, because we have enough data and we have systems and programs that we created. We can enter quantities and location of the job on the property, and it will start generating your estimate, your worksheet or pull sheet, all your materials, all material costs, and all your labor. And it will be able to generate that as quickly as you can enter it. So as long as you can figure out how many the product you need and where the job is located on the house and the distance the job is from my shop, you're an estimator. So really, we've refined that down to systems, so we're not beholden to one person.
Yeah, and at this level, these 2 revenue tiers, growing beyond it can be extremely painful if you don't manage your growth properly. And what I typically see is owners are working harder, thinking, oh, I'm going to bust through this level of revenue, instead of working smarter, and really leaning into the systems and processes to get to the next level. So they're not maxing out the capacity of their team. And we talk about this a lot, to where we say there's so many softwares out there that automate so many things. How can you really give some more capacity to your team and leverage the people on your team by using the softwares, the automations, these processes, so things happen automatically and it's less touch points for people. So being smart about how your team is working, how you are working, and really creating efficiencies in the business by creating this process, and you not being the person everybody goes to for every single answer, or even allowing one person on your team to be that answer person. You never want to create that situation.
Yeah, and it's the 2.5 to 5 million. Again, it can be. This is where slowing down and making sure you really have all your systems in. The biggest challenge I see is companies trying to sell their way through this. So the owner is not. I'm not a systems guy. I love systems, but I'm not documenting it. I would sell my way through this. I would crush this company. I could just keep selling and selling and selling. And we dialed back our marketing to 1.4% because, we need to build our management team. We need to build our labor team to grow steadily. We don't need to blow this out of the market. It's easier for me to market and sell than anything else, than hire, attract, train. And so if you have a sales mindset, owner, they can crush the company because they're not developing their emerging leaders. That's one of the biggest things. That's why we have our emerging leader program Green Profit Academy. So they're not developing their emerging leaders with the skill set or the mindset to support a company that goes beyond $5 million. And I would even say, looking back at it, we started working on this when we were at like 3.2, the mindset in the emerging leader. And it's helped us get to that $5+ million mark. If I had not done it then, I think we would have grown up to where we were, and then we would have had to dial it back and then, start again.
Yeah. So the next tier is tier 6, and this is from the 5 million to 10 million. And this is typically where you start bringing in, a management team. So you've already been working on those emerging leaders. They're stepping into that management team in order to bring the company to the next stage. And this is where management begins to form as the owner starts to focus more on of their special strengths, right? We have clients we work with, and, I've asked them like, hey, what do you want to do? Like, what's your dream role in the company? And they say, I just want to do sales. I want to go around, talk to clients and do sales. And now, when they're at this revenue level, all they do is go around all day and they do sales and they talk to people. And we jump on a call and you see rolling green grass in the background. They're out in the field. They're living their best life. That's what they wanted to do. So every focus is going to be different in every company based on what you really want to do. Some people really like to dive into the numbers. Some people want to do sales. Some people, they want to do more management and, development. So this is at that level where that starts to happen. And the owners are on payroll. So your entity should be, a C Corp or an S Corp, and you should be on payroll as an employee. And, the majority of the income from the company comes from the profitability, so as you're stepping out of that role, you're taking bigger profit distributions, and maybe less salary. So it's a whole new world as you move into this $5 to $10 million revenue.
And that's only going to be 5 to 7% of the entire industry, right? And typically that's going to be a mature company. It's going to be 25 years or older, or 35 years and older. It might even be second generation. Typically it's going to be in an area that has a lot of growth, in a metropolitan suburb of, a couple million people. But not all the time. It could be a kind of a country. Many times people come to visit me and we are out in the country and they're like, wait, what? How did you grow your company to that size? So we just have to cover a lot more area because we don't have the population, as far as mileage, but, it's possible to do that. And some of the challenges with that $5 to $10 million is, again, the owner takes their eye off the ball and, they're not watching and paying attention, and they have a manager take over the company that doesn't match up the company culture or the company values, and things start to go sideways. Or the owner thinks it's time to kind of like abdicate the management of the company, and they don't tell anybody. They're not really going to participate. They just kind of stop showing up. And everybody is wondering, what's the narrative? What's the mission? What's the vision? And they're just on, Gulf Street or wherever they're at. We've seen that sometimes. And a lot of times, like that kind of is what happened to some companies up to like 2006, between 2000, that whole crisis. There was a lot of growth in this company, in the country, and it was easy to sell and grow. And I know there were some huge companies, $30-40 million companies in Florida that went bankrupt during that time because they were really growing on the building boom in Florida, in Arizona, and not because they had built a company of growth. So that happens. It happens often. So that the other thing in that $5 to $10 million is, not having a plan for the future of the company. The owner thinks they're going to live forever and they're going to run the company forever. And there's a health crisis or death, or someone in the family gets sick and they can't pay attention, and they haven't given the growth and the permission to their management team to step up and run that company.
Yeah. And the last tier is tier 7. So this is the 10 million to 50 million. And this is typically when a business starts to stabilize and it achieves that predictable growth. So they know what their numbers are. They know what their marketing investment is, their ROI. They know I need to spend this much or do X, Y, and Z in order to grow the revenue, to this degree. So really they have a strategic plan in place. And then the owner is typically, they're getting profit distributions. They're almost like a shareholder. They may not even be in the day-to-day of the business. They just might be doing some strategic planning, reviewing some business plans, weighing in on some bigger decisions. We have clients to where they've been kicked out of the main offices and put in a remote location. And their team is basically saying, hey, we got this. And now, you just stay over there and we'll give you things that you work on and, that you're good at. And then, give us some guidance and feedback. So the company has really matured to a whole new level. And as the business owner, depends, you might just be, holding more of a higher end CEO role or COO role, or maybe even CFO if money is, where the magic happens for you. So a business at this size, there's a lot of efficiencies that can be leveraged and opportunities to maximize profit, and really inviting the leadership team in and giving them the reins and, developing them from that prior tier is going to really tell how you come out at the beginning of this tier. Like you're either going to come out the gate strong as you hit over that 10 million, or you might even struggle a little bit. I would say if you're struggling, it's probably because you're missing some processes, you're missing some strategy, and you're missing some key players on your leadership team or even proper delegation in your company.
Yeah, 50 million, typically you're not involved in the sales anymore. You're not involved in the day-to-day production anymore, but mission, vision, purpose of the company, you're looking out at, 1 to 3 to 5 to 10 years for the company. The thing is, right, then you're an S Corp or a C Corp, you're not personally guaranteeing loans anymore. The corporation is. You're developing that management team to run the company in the future, and also making sure that they are, skilled and talented at running the company. A lot of times these are family companies. So the sons, the daughters, they end up as the CEO, CFO, and making sure that they're actually qualified and have the skill set to do that. And sometimes, and Christeen shared, they kind of get kicked out of the company because the owner could grow it to 5 or 6 million with a certain skill set, but to get it to 10 plus, it takes a whole different skill set. And the owner now is actually in the way and slowing the growth of the company down. So that's a hard pill to swallow for certain people. But $10 million, you're going to have a comptroller, you're going to have an HR department, right? At least 2 people as HR. You're going to have a whole hiring department. You're going to have, purchase ordering. You're going to have, you're going to have either a retained, at least maybe 2 different attorneys on retainer, one a labor attorney, and then one for contract law in some capacity. You're also going to have a fairly large size. And when I say large, I mean more than the CPA. It's going to be a CPA firm that has at least probably 7 to 20 employees. And so those are some of the legal things. You're going to have a person that manages, you're going to have a technology manager and a fleet manager. So typically the operations person will manage the fleet, but once you get past, 10 million, you're in that 40 vehicle. You're going to have some type of mechanics. They're going to have to be managed. The fleet's going to have to be managed. You're going to have a tech person that's going to have to manage, especially today where you have lots of security issues. If you have a big staff and there's a lot of computers, they have to be protecting the company. So you're most likely going to have an IT person either on staff or you're going to have an IT company you're working with. But our vendors still need to be managed. So even if you have companies that do things for you, we still have to manage all our vendors. They're not taking care of us. It's not like I hired somebody and we can close our eyes. You have to watch everything your vendors do.
Yeah. Yeah. And staying in communication with them, just like your key employees, right? what expectations do we have? What are our needs? What have changed? Are there things we could do better? So really leveraging those relationships as you continue to grow. So I want to quickly talk about before we close up today. So how do we know if your business is financially healthy, right? And this is a big question. Some people make assumptions. They go, oh yeah, well, our profit margin was this or this or that, which can be very confusing, especially with the amount of cash that has been infused into businesses over the past few years, from, the employee retention credits to the EIDL loans, things like that. So really being aware, is my business financially healthy? And if you are even making a profit, let's say you're making a decent profit, where are areas of opportunity that you can make more profit? So in the book, we share how to do a profit first assessment. I am going to include some links in the show notes today to our toolbox, as well as the link to purchase the book if you haven't done so already on Amazon. And you can go in here and check out the instant assessment online, where you can do an instant assessment on your business and identify, just the basics of how profitable is your business? How much money are you putting away? What are your operating expenses? And kind of compare that assessment to the charts that we have in the book. And if I recall, the assessment will actually spit out the revenue level that you're at and where your percentages should be on your revenue tier, and then where your company is today. So if you're curious, is my business where it should be? Is there opportunity to increase my profit? I do invite you to please go and take that instant assessment link that we'll be sharing in our show notes today.
Okay. Good show. I think we covered a lot of good material. And if you have any questions about where you are in the cycle, or if you need help, reach out to us. That's why we're in the Green Profit Academy, is to help people so you don't have to struggle through each one of these phases of business. Or if you're stuck in one of the phases, how to work through it, and you don't have to be alone doing it. So thank you for joining us, and we look forward to you joining us next time.
Thanks for listening to the Green Profit Academy Pros Podcast,
the show that digs into the challenges of growing a lawn care and landscape business while maximizing your profit.